Should you get a Mexican residential visa or not? That is the question. For those of you who've been thinking about it, getting a temporary residential visa here in Mexico, do it or not, this one's for you. So I've made 2 applications already for residential visa, temporary one, but I've never completed them. The first one was about a couple of years ago. I actually got approved, but when I came down to Mexico, it just got too busy and I wasn't able to get into the immigration office. It was a bit of a pain, and I just decided, fine, skip it. And then last year, I applied again and got approved. I was approved based on financial criteria, and I came into the country this time on that visa thinking maybe I will complete it because I was already approved. I already met the standards, got approved. All I had to do was come into the immigration office and fill out the forms and so forth and so forth. But I decided not to, and here's why. And this is also why I think you might want to reconsider the whole visa situation here in Mexico. I'm wearing this because it is so hot and the sun is so intense here right now that I am literally cooking. This is just trying to keep the sun off me. So if it looks a little weird, that's what's going on. So I was going to complete my temporary residential visa on this trip, but after thinking about it, I decided not to, and here's why. During COVID, that time, if you remember in COVID, you know, when the insanity was hitting the planet, where every country was losing its marbles and your freedoms were being stolen from you, Mexico was a safe haven. Mexico is a place you can come to and basically lead a semi-normal life and enjoy like wonderful weather and travel around uninhibited. It was relatively cheap at the time. So many people then decided, screw it, I'm leaving, I'm never coming back, I'm going to Mexico, I'm getting my temporary residential visa, and that's it, I'm done. Especially people who are close to retirement or at retirement age, they decided, screw it, they're not going to do it. They're not going to suffer through the insanity of this whole COVID lockdown nonsense, and decided to come down. It made sense. At the time, Mexico was giving us 180 days tourist visa, which is basically 6 months. We had 6 months to be here, travel around, do what we want, and if we wanted to get another 6 months, all we had to do was basically leave the country for like a couple of days, come back, and boom, you know, again, another 180 days. What you couldn't do on a tourist visa is open a bank account. You couldn't buy property. You couldn't, you know, own a car here. So there were certain restrictions of not having a visa. To me, those restrictions were not a big deal. I didn't want to own a car. I didn't want to own property. I didn't want a bank account. I already had a bank account. I could get money anytime I wanted. So the idea of having that residential visa didn't appeal to me on those grounds, but it did appeal to me if things were to get really bad as far as lockdowns and our freedoms. And as you know, Canadian government happened to be very strict with its with the way it handled lockdowns. You know, a lot of illegal, unconstitutional things happened, and people didn't seem to fight back too hard. And I was feeling hopeless that maybe, you know, that was it. Trudeau was, you know, just gonna screw us over. And so leaving the country was definitely an option. Now, I have European citizenship. I could have gone to Portugal easily. But Portugal was in the same situation. They were, you know, Portugal was losing its mind too, with all the lockdowns and the fear and everything. And based on my communications with my relatives, it seemed like they believed it, they bought into it. So it wasn't a country I was really wanting to move to. Mexico, on the other hand, was fine. At the time, Mexico was pretty free. Yeah, you know, you did have to wear masks in certain situations, but nobody forced you to do a PCR test. Nobody forced you to do a vaccine. Nobody checked anything. Nobody looked at your papers. Nothing. You know, you could travel freely without restrictions. And that was really, really a good thing. But now, COVID's over. And lockdowns are over. That sudden rush of visas that were being approved for Mexico, which actually created a huge problem. The demand for Mexican visas became so high that literally they started pulling back, and they started, by the end, I think in the last year, there were reports that there were reports that instead of the 180 days of tourist visa, they were only allowing 30 days or a couple of weeks. It was kind of at the discretion of the customs official. Some people would say, you know, don't go through Cancun, go through Mexico City. They'll give you the 80 days. If you go through Cancun, they'll only give you 30 days. There was all this confusion because everybody was coming to Mexico. And the country was starting to get overwhelmed, and then probably they were getting international pressure to like close the border or slow it down, throttle it, to keep us from leaving our home countries. Because Mexico is, like, again, one of the countries where you can come to and feel free. But now COVID's over, and the lockdowns are over, and things are more or less back to normal. So, you know, 180-day visas are typical now. You don't have to worry about this 30-day, 7-day fiasco. But yeah, some people are still applying for the residential visa. And what I can tell you is this: unless you plan on living here, like moving here, making your life here, like leaving your country behind and starting here, then, in my opinion, the visa does not make any sense. Buenos dias. Buenos dias. Doesn't make any sense, because what does it actually give you? And what do you actually have to pay for it? It's not free. So this is what you have to go through. To get a temporary Mexican visa in your home country, you have to contact the Mexican consulate or embassy, download some forms, filled them out, and there are certain criteria by which you can meet the standards for approval. One of them being the financial solvency. There's other criteria, and you can find all that information online. But most people do it based on the financial criteria. In Canada at the time, I think it was around $4,000 a month you had to show for 6 months. $4,000 a month income for 6 months, and you're basically met the criteria. That number might go higher because, again, every year they raise the criteria. I think a few years before it was only 3,000 something. So I imagine every year they're going to raise the criteria. So download the forms, fill them out, meet the criteria, financial insolvency, and might have some other criteria. You can try like being a student, or you might be married to a Mexican, who knows. There's other criteria you could use to enter the country. You could even enter the country as a refugee. But you got to demonstrate that you're being persecuted in your own country. So you have to do that. The embassy looks it over. You send it in, you email it in. Embassy looks it over. If they feel you meet the criteria, they say, if you have pending approval, come into the office and bring these documents, and I think it was $200 or something, and to complete the process. So now you have to go make an appointment with the embassy and go downtown. You speak with someone there. They take your picture. They help you fill out your form. You give them the cash. It's all cash. No credit card or debit. It's all cash. They tell you to come back in an hour or sometime in the afternoon. And then by then, your visa is approved and you have a stamp in your passport with your picture and stuff. And then you got 6 months from that day to land in Mexico, enter the country on that residential visa, and then you have 30 days to go to an immigration office anywhere, it could be in any city, anywhere in Mexico, to complete the process and get your card. I don't know why they make you do this. Why don't they just give you a card right there at the embassy? But for whatever reason, there's a second step. And it's always been at that second step that I decided, screw it. Also at that second step, when you go to the immigration office, you will need to pay, I think it's somewhere in the order of $800 or $600 US for the first year of the visa, because the residential visa costs about $800 or $600 US a year. I forgot exactly what the number is. Maybe somebody can post it, but it's thereabouts. So every year you have to reapply, but it's approved. You just have to go back and do the process at the immigration office, give them another $800 or so, and then it gives you another year. It just extends year to year to year to year. On the 4th year, then you need to apply for a permanent visa. And then you have to demonstrate, again, certain criteria, usually financial, a certain level of savings or income per month. You got to demonstrate for you to get your permanent visa. So you're not completely home free. Residential visa is for 4 years maximum, and that's it. But with the residential visa, you can buy property, you can own a car, you can open a bank account and have certain privileges, but not all the privileges. You cannot work. You cannot work in Mexico on a temporary residential visa. So you will have to make your money elsewhere, either through your retirement, other income, maybe your remote work, whatever it is you do, but that you'll have to sort out. Once you get your permanent residency, then you will be able to work. But then working in Mexico isn't all it's cut out to be, because you don't make much money in Mexico as a worker unless you're an executive or some high paid, in jobs, some tech job or something where you're making a lot of money. Otherwise, you're not making a lot of money. So there is sort of no, I don't see the point of it working here. So you have to have your financial situation pretty secured outside, either through remote work or savings or some other form of, cash flow income to get that, to keep that temporary visa. And then, you can come and go. But the tourist visa is just as good. Buenos dias. Hola. The residential visa, the tourist visa, to me, is great. You got 6 months, and okay, you might not be able to get the same deal on an apartment that you would if you signed a lease for a year, right? If you're able to sign a lease for a year, you can get a pretty good deal on your apartment. 6 months, maybe not as much, but okay. But do you want to be here for a year? Do you want to really live here for a year? Or do you just want to come here in the winter? Or something? If you give up your home, your apartment or house in your home country, and then you don't have a house, so maybe it makes sense. But if you're still holding on to your apartment or your house, then you're paying for 2 properties. So I don't know, it doesn't really make sense, does it? So my thing is, unless you want to live here, unless you really want to bite the bullet, come live here on a permanent basis, make this your life, stay here year-round, yes, get a residential visa. You could maybe buy a condo and, sort out your finances in a way, live much cheaper than you would in your home country. I think for that type of situation, it makes sense. It is a little cheaper than living in, let's say, Canada as a retirement person, somebody who's retired, considering, what it costs to live in Canada right now with apartments and cost of living, you're probably better off living in Mexico where it's cheaper. But again, you do have to find accommodation and so forth. You got to sort that through. So there it makes sense. For those people who aren't retired, I say don't do it. Just get a tourist visa. Come here for 80 days. Play around. This might not be your destination. This might not be the place where you end up living. So don't go through all the work of applying, for the visa in your home country, meeting the criteria, having to go to the bank, printing out your bank statements, having them signed, notarized, all that stuff, taking the time, go down to the embassy, etc., etc., and then realizing, what, I don't really need a residential visa. I can do fine with just a tourist visa. So just keep that in mind. That's the way I look at it. And that's how I approached it, because as much as I love Mexico, I'm not gonna live here year round. Not yet. I have options. I have Portuguese, European citizenship, which means I could live in Europe right now and enjoy all the benefits and privileges of a European citizenship. I don't need, to go through any process or approval of going to Europe. So I have options. And even then, I don't know if I'd want to live in Europe on a permanent, ongoing basis. But right now, I just feel like I might just want to wander and explore more countries and check out new cities, new destinations. So far, I've been mostly in Mexico, but it's, there's certain reasons for that. And, I'm not really in a position to talk about those reasons, but I'm kind of like a little bit stuck. And once this process completes and I'm free to go, I will start traveling on a more regular basis and start to explore more countries outside of North America, outside of South America. Probably start to venture out back into Asia, where I've traveled and through for many years. Go back to Thailand, Indonesia, India, and Southeast Asia, those countries, and go there. There's a lot to see. A lot more adventures to go through before I settle down. So that's my 2 cents on the visa situation. Just because you can get it doesn't mean you should. Something to think about and consider. Again, if you want to retire and don't want to move around, want to stay in one place, don't want to pay the high prices of North American rents and living, and you want to stay put, then I think Mexico offers a great value proposition. But if that's not your position, then I say, maybe not. Maybe just stick to the 6-month thing, come and go, and stay for a few months. You can still get some pretty cheap apartments for a few months. If you look around, if you do your research, so you can get some cheap deals. And maybe you don't want to stay in one place. Maybe you want to stay in Tulum for a couple of months, and you want to go to Puerto Vallarta for a couple of months. Maybe you don't want to stay in one place. So the rents aren't going to be, you're going to have to face that. There you have it. Just some food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you have any questions, I can answer them. Just my thoughts. So do your research and let me know what you think.